Hi, I'm James Dinowitz from Mythic Writer, where I try to help you make writing fiction easier and more profitable. But today we're talking about should you use current events in your fiction? Obviously, with a lot of things going on in this day and age, between the pandemic and the uh, riots, protests, upheaval, there's a lot, obviously, that on our plates as a society right now. A lot more than most people are used to dealing with. And you think, I'm getting a lot of story ideas around this, or if I'm writing fiction, how I write a story that doesn't include these things going on. Well, I will argue today that for the most part, I would try to avoid current events in your fiction. Sometimes they make for good fiction, but they also do make fiction dated eventually. So it depends on the life line that you want your fiction to have, how long in the future you want your fiction to be viable. I mean, obviously, reading a story now about the Vietnam War might put you back in that time. It might, in a way, it might be interesting to see what it was like. But I say that you would be better off to turn to history uh, or some kind of nonfiction if you really want that experience. What you'll really find is the average person, especially younger readers, would say, "Oh wow, this is obviously written a long time ago. This is really not current, and I'm not interested in it." It's just how a lot of young readers tend to be. Um, so by sticking with general life experiences, things that become universal, it's a lot easier to, it's a lot easier to keep that fiction current as time goes by. I read a lot of fiction. I read some fiction by Charles Beaumont, and it could have been written yesterday, even though it was really written in the 1960s. Sometimes you might catch a phrase or whatever that kind of clues you in. And that would be the other thing I would say. Watch using a lot of slang. Slang does make things sound current. Probably if you're writing young adult fiction, it might help you. But the problem is 10 years later, most slang becomes very outdated and isn't still used. So your fiction kind of takes on that datedness once again. And here at Mythic Writer, what I'm going to try and encourage you to do is create a body of work that you can still be selling and making money from 20 and 30 years from now. That's the goal. As you get more and more stories out there, you're going to have more and more opportunities to make money. Whether you're selling single stories for, let's say, 99 cents on Amazon, or you're selling audios through a podcast, which we'll get into all that in future videos. Uh, you want these stories to be somewhat current. Some things are going to get dated, yes. I mean, obviously, if you're writing stories in the 1890s, it's kind of hard to stay up to date there when you're talking about your horse and buggy. But at the same time, as I pointed out, some things change very little. Probably the one thing that really makes a piece of fiction when you're reading it, let's say from the 50s or 60s, make you wonder if it's modern, is you don't see people using cellular phones or smartphones, and so it's pretty hard to get by nowadays. I think in a realistic scene, people would have some kind of a device with them. But some of my fiction, I don't include that. So once again, though, that's going to probably be with us for a long time. So, the smartphone may get replaced with something else, but it's probably not totally unusual to think that you're going to have some kind of device. Maybe you will be wearing it on your wrist. Maybe it'll be in your glasses. Maybe it'll be installed in your body. Hope not. So just think about the slang, think about the technology you're putting in your fiction, and think about the world events. Now, if you're the kind of writer who really wants to obviously touch on world events, you can do that without specifically naming them. We can make statements, let's say in support of Black Lives Matter if we want, without talking about the demonstrations and police brutality and all that. We could do stories that have issues related to that in the background. Take Stephen King's Salem's Lot, for instance. came out around 1975. Had Stephen King put a lot of references to the Vietnam War and Nixon and all that stuff in that novel, we would have really dated that novel. You can read that novel today, and it seems like something that could be going on that could have been written yesterday. But in that novel, many would probably argue that the vampires themselves may have served almost as a um, metaphor for things that had been going on in the world at that time, how things can get into your society underneath the underbelly and just drain it, just like the Vietnam War drained the country. So there's a lot of ways to write more timeless fiction by including the big themes of what's going on in your world at the time without specifically writing about that. Because here's what's going to probably happen. There's probably going to be 10,000 pandemic stories. I mean, I'd say they're already out there, but there'll probably be 10,000 pandemic stories in the next few months coming out. It's going to get kind of tiring, quite frankly, to read about that topic. And really, fiction is escapism. So in a way, a lot of people probably want to get away from what's going on in the world right now. You could still make up a pandemic story. Look at Stephen King's The Stand, totally different thing, but yet has some echoes of what's going on. That 30 years from now, people could still be reading The Stand and say, wow, that's interesting. That's a good novel. Seems pretty current. So just keep this in mind. A lot of people don't always think about these things when they're writing. I'm not saying there's a wrong or right answer here, because as in fiction, as you will see on my channel, there are kind of rules and guidelines, but nothing is ever set in stone, really. Let's be honest. But you need to understand the perimeters that you're working in. You need to understand the rules to break them. Okay, you don't want to accidentally break them and look like a fool. So everything I tell you is just my advice and food for thought for you. I don't really generally try to say this or that is solid, the only way to do it, because it's really not. And if someone's telling you that there's only one way to do this, one way to do that, it's not really true. They really don't know what you're talking about, because when you're writing fiction, what works for you is what works for you, and everyone's different. And the number one thing that makes your fiction great is the more it resembles you specifically, your point of view, your way of living, your way of writing and putting ideas out there, and your personal writing style. So don't be afraid. Put yourself in your fiction a little bit. I would argue keeping this world that's around you, whenever it's around you, out of your fiction as much as you can will help your fiction be a little more timely. Now, I've been inspired with some story ideas that are about things going on right now, but I'm not going to write them specifically about these actual real life events. They're going to be, a derivative of it. And I think if you do that, you'll be happier 5 10 years from now. Someone that wrote 9/11 stories back in 2001, 2002, might seem really current and got a lot of boost out of that because people were upset by that. People were affected by that. That was a big blow to our country. But now I think a lot of people would find it sort of dated. Younger people would probably find it maybe interesting. Some of them would probably think, well, this happened before I was born. So you got to watch what you're writing about. Someone could have easily written, though, a book about a fictional made-up attack like that by not being in the news and being reality-based would still kind of be current and make sense. We see this in the movies all the time. I'm always seeing movies. I think, wow, that's sort of like what happened here, and that's sort of like what happened there. And remember, fiction should mirror real life to a degree, but it should not be an actual recording of real life. Okay, it's a reflection. It's almost what you might call a made-up reflection, in that you're making it look better and make more sense than real life does. Real life doesn't always make a lot of sense. Let's be honest. Bad people live to be 100. Good people die when they're young. There's not a lot of logic in life itself. That's what we need fiction for, is to help us make sense of this crazy mess that we call life. So when you're writing your fiction, keep that in mind. Try not to bury all your fiction that you're going to write over the next 2 years and these crazy events that are going on. Allow yourself as a writer even to escape this world in your fiction. Your readers will thank you for it. You'll probably thank yourself for it, because it's nice to get your mind off of things right now in this time. So hang in there, writers. We'll be coming back to you some more. This was a live stream. Sorry for all the imperfections. We will be coming back with some, produced videos, if you will. I do have my studio being set up right now, but every now and then I like to come to you just live, out of nowhere, unscripted, unedited, and just see what we come up with. Eventually, we'll have some question and answer time as we build a little audience on this channel, and because I'd like to hear from you guys. So let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do you feel like it's great to write about current events, or are you kind of agreeing with me? Maybe think about your future, your fiction 5 years from now, that the current events maybe won't seem as current. I mean, obviously, reading stories about the 1918 pandemic right now, most people, most teenagers, most 20, 30-year-olds probably wouldn't find that fascinating. If someone really wants to learn about that, they will go to a history book. So let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you later. Hang in there, Mythic Writers.